Hey everyone. It's very important to hydrate during these things, so that's why I always have a bottle of water here. So, what I'll be talking to you about today is something I call remarkable content angles. But let me first introduce myself, and then we're gonna switch to the actual practical stuff. So, I'm gonna keep this brief. I'm Vasi. My full name is Vasilena. That's hard for international audiences. That's also the name that only one person uses, and that's my mom when I've done something wrong, so I really prefer Vasi. I'm a content marketer and brand messaging expert. I am also a lot of other things that we can talk about later, so if you need an icebreaker, as Remkus earlier mentioned, I don't bite, so find me in the hallway. And you can find a lot about me online, so I'll keep this intro brief. Everything you need to know can be found on my website, volchanova.me. You are more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn or most social platforms where you'll find me anyway. It's not a common name, which is great for personal branding. So, I wanted to first introduce this topic by quoting a person who has today's world pretty much down to a notch. And this is what he says: times are bad, children disobey their parents, and everyone is writing a book. This is something that supposedly Cicero said in the year 50 before Christ. He didn't actually say it, but that's not necessarily important to the point I'm trying to make here, but I had to mention that because I don't want to spread fake news. But this is sort of a concept that we've heard reiterated throughout the ages. First off, the press made by Gutenberg. I think it's important to mention his name at a WordCamp event anyway. When that came out, people were like, oh geez, like we're gonna be like flooded with information now. How are people gonna keep track? Then the radio came, then TV, then the internet. All throughout, it seems that everyone is writing a book or writing the next post online or whatever. And nowadays, things are getting worse and worse. This is the amount of information that will be created by the end of this year, 147 zettabytes. I'm a marketer. I don't really know a lot about bytes, but this is sort of like what zettabytes looks like in its full length, which is kind of astounding and ridiculous and terrible all at the same time if you're a content creator. Things are gonna get worse over time. And what this means is that as people trying to attract attention on the internet, all of the time we're trying to fight for that attention. And often it doesn't seem like it's super easy to do that, or that it's even working. And every day we hear about the latest algorithm hack that's gonna help us, take over the first page of Google, or be the person that gets the most amount of impressions on LinkedIn, or X, or Threads, or Blue Sky, or whatever platform you're looking at nowadays. And things seem to be pretty confusing and pretty hard to understand how to actually get there. How do you attract attention, first of all, but even more importantly, keep attention? And as they say in infomercials, there's gotta be a better way than just trying to guess what the algorithm wants and feeding it, frankly, not the most interesting content out there, right? And I'm gonna give you my solution, and I want to open the caveat here that this is my solution. It may not work for everyone. It definitely won't be something most content marketers are gonna say, because it seems to be simple on the surface, but deep down it's pretty hard to do. And my solution is what I call remarkable content angles. And frankly, being at a Bulgarian event speaking in English, that's the main reason why I kept this talk in English, because translating remarkable content angles has proven an unsolvable challenge for me. And if I had to mention remarkable content angles 50 times within this presentation in English, it makes sense to have the whole content in English. So that's why a Bulgarian is speaking to mostly a Bulgarian audience in English. So, what are remarkable content angles? The first thing I want you to keep in mind is that when I say remarkable, I'm using the dictionary definition of the word, which is something that's worthy of attention because it's interesting, significant, or unusual. This doesn't mean that you need to have something that no one has ever uttered before, because as Cicero knew way back when, this is very hard to do. A lot of information is already out there. So having something that's completely unique, completely original, that's a very tall ask. So I want you to think, when I'm saying remarkable, I want you to think about this: interesting, significant, unusual. It doesn't need to be completely new, as long as there is some form of misunderstanding that you want to clear up, or something that's not necessarily a common truth that people have come to know and, embrace. The other component of that is the angle part. This is basically the way you are approaching a specific topic or issue. And this can be your professional field if you're building a personal brand through content, or it may be a specific field that your customers are interested in if you're developing a consumer brand. So think about, running and Nike in that case. And the final thing about this definition here is that I will be speaking about content specifically, but it can be a lot more than that. Having a remarkable angle is going to help you build a brand way more easily than anything else that you can do out there. At least that's my opinion, and that's what I've seen being true when I work with clients and when I work on my own personal brand. So, how do we find these angles? Usually, the thing that I hear from people is that they see this definition and they're immediately sort of taken aback. They don't know what they need to do in order to decide what they need to say. And there's a lot more to it than what I'll show you here in the slides, but for time's sake, because we don't have a ton of time, I'll give you 3 specific areas to think about. And at the end of my slide deck, there is a link to download the slides and additional resources that you can use to find your remarkable content angle. The first one is your beliefs. Basically, what do you feel is true that maybe not everyone is sold on? For me, in my field in marketing, I believe that content marketing is being overcomplicated on purpose. And it's actually way simpler than what a lot of people say. It just requires consistency, which makes it hard. But it's not complicated. It's just hard to do on a daily basis because you need to be there. The second area that you can think about are your ideas. What do you know is super important for people to know? This is what I'm here to share with you. This is my idea about remarkable content angles. And sure, there are some other experts who've spoken about similar ideas. Maybe the most famous is Wes Cao, who calls it spiky ideas or spiky views. But it's still something that not a lot of people are talking about. And as long as it covers our previously discussed definition of remarkable, then it's okay for you to use it and build your brand upon it. And finally, it's also about your story. So what have you learned so far that you want to share with the world? For me, being here on the stage of WordCamp Sofia is super exhilarating because my journey as a public speaker started with WordCamp Sofia. And it's also the place where I started talking about content marketing in the first place. And all throughout, I've been building on top of my understanding of content, and this journey has led me to where I am today. As you can see, this is still about consistency, because WordCamp Sofia 2010 or WordCamp Bulgaria 2010 happened quite a long time ago. So this is something that I've learned and that I keep sharing. I want to give you a few examples because I know that this isn't really, a very clear concept to understand. So this is one guy who does remarkable content really, really nicely. He's called Louis Grenier. He's obviously French by the name. And he shares with people how they can get better at differentiation. But he doesn't use the marketing term differentiation. He actually calls it standing the F out. And if you look at his content, the way he shares this information, first off, he's literally allergic to marketing BS, and he says it on a daily basis. All of his content is very standoffish. It very nicely represents his personal brand. But it's not just about, creating a certain persona and being counter-narrative. He actually shares a lot that's very helpful to people. He does poke a lot of fun on different concepts. Ooh, where is that? There we go. So he jokes about cold email and cold outreach. He jokes about how LinkedIn became this field of badge chasers, but he also shares information, for example, how he rebranded his own personal brand, and shares with people how they can do that and how to get back to basics in order to create a brand that stands out. So it's not just about having that cocky version of himself. It's also about sharing information with people and being valuable and being helpful. Another example, a very great example in my personal view, are Jason Fried and David Heinemeier-Hanser, who are the founders of 37 Signals, the creators of a project management platform called Basecamp. Maybe some of you know about it already. And what they do is they sort of focus on this concept of what I call the anti-grind. And the best example of that is a book they actually published, which is called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. If you can write a book about your remarkable content angle, you definitely truly believe in it and you have a lot to share on the subject. And they create other content around that as well. So for example, their podcast, it often talks about this idea that you don't need to be hustling all the time and working 100 hours a week or whatever to get where you need to be. Actually having a company that's calm, that's easy to work in, is the hallmark of what you want to build as a founder. And them talking about that, it's not just about, sharing an idea that they're passionate about. It's actually something that they promote through the use of their product as well. So their remarkable content angle is very closely tied to the product that they're actually developing and selling, which at the end of the day is what we want to do with marketing. It's not just about the content, it's also about the marketing side. And the final example I want to give you, and this is one of my personal all-time favorites, is a woman called Simone Bruni, who's the founder of a demolition company called Demo Diva. Have you ever seen a brightly pink colored demolition machine? Ever? I know I haven't. And her journey is very interesting because she started the company right after Hurricane Katrina went through New Orleans. And she found out that to get rid of demolition rubble, before you can start building something new, you need a demolition company. But most demolition companies are not easy to understand in terms of how they price your offer, or in terms of what you even need to do in order to get your lot cleaned out. So she decided to found this company, Demo Diva, as a way to be more approachable and easier to work with when you have an issue with the demolition site. And she is the perfect example that you can use your remarkable angle to build a full-on brand. And the reason why she can stand out so much is that in her field, this is what ChatGPT thinks is a diverse group of people working in demolition. Doesn't look too diverse to me though, does it? And what she says is that we want to demolition with care. We want to be friendly. We want to help you out. We know that oftentimes demolition comes with a a very big transition for a business or a person, because you need to actually build something new, but you need to demolish what's already there before you can build that new thing. So this is a great example how if you're in a field that's not as open, not as diverse, you can very much bank on the buck of your remarkable content angle and build it into a full brand. And I know that these examples are not exactly WordPress related, so I wanted to give you a few others. If you think about building a fast and performant WordPress site, I know who I think about, my dear friend Remkus, who was here earlier today. If I think about building an accessible website, I think about Pictionary. If I think about making a community that's inclusive to women and building up female leadership in WordPress-led companies, I'm thinking about Francesco Marano. If I'm thinking about B2B enterprise solutions for WordPress, I'm thinking about Stanko and Mario from Devrix. And this is how you can use your love of WordPress to build your remarkable angle that's going to help you build both your content and your brand. And it doesn't only apply to person-led brands or even personal brands, but it does help a lot in situations where I think quite a lot of us here are people who are building sort of their own company based on the expertise they have, be it a single-person company like myself, or be it an agency that relies on the personal brands of the founders or on the leadership team to get where they want to get. So the final thing you need to do is try to search for as many angles as you can and then prioritize them based on a few criteria. And as I mentioned, I don't have a lot of time, so I'll share with you just the top ones, the highlights. And within the page where you'll find the slide deck from today's session, you also see a worksheet that you can use to do just that. The first thing that we want to think about is this a concept that I feel strongly about? If you just choose an angle for yourself that's not something you're passionate about, it's quickly going to fizzle out, because you can't really focus on a subject if you're going at it again and again and again, unless you really feel strongly about it. The second one is, how common is this idea in my field? As I mentioned, it doesn't need to be completely new, but also if it's something that everyone recognizes as truth, then you don't really have a remarkable content angle, you just have a content angle. Then you need to think about whether or not this concept is something that will resonate with your audience. I personally believe that cats make the best CFOs for freelance businesses, because my cat is very diligent at counting how many pieces of kibble she has in her cup, but that's not really something that's going to resonate with marketers. And the final thing is to think about how closely this concept aligns with your products or services. The Basecamp example I shared is a great one because they are focusing on something that they believe strongly, but that's also consistent with the product that they're building. And once you find that angle, you need to ruthlessly and continuously create content focused on that. And this is probably the biggest, I don't want to call it a mistake, but sort of a misconception about creating content online, because people believe they need to be saying something completely new every day. And that's not true. You actually want to be saying the same thing day after day. So you want to introduce your content angle, you want to explain what you stand for. And then you want to continuously offer new framings around it. So these are different stories that sort of represent that idea. These are different examples that embody it. These are different questions you've heard about that area of your work or life. This can be even sort of an analogy that you can make with other fields of your life that sort of represent that same idea. It can be quite a lot of different things. The cool thing about offering these new framings is that they make things more familiar for your audience, and then they also help them understand what you mean. Because if I only stand here today and share with you, hey guys, content isn't too complicated, you just need to find the right angle to go at it, you may nod and you may be happy with what you hear, or you may start thinking about how you can implement it, but it's still a very nebulous concept. And I need to give you a few examples for you to start understanding what I mean. And I need to share with you how I personally do it for you to truly understand how you can do it as well. And this is the benefit of repetition. And finally, what this does is that it attracts repeat fans, the people who feel just as strongly about your remarkable content angle as you do yourself. And the cool thing with that is that when you find these people, even if they are very, very few, if just a dozen people, a couple of dozens people believe that same thing that you believe, you can get them to introduce you to their own audience, and then this whole cycle starts again and again. So don't be shy about repeating yourself. On the contrary, do it thoroughly, do it ruthlessly, and do it mindfully as well. You don't need to sound like a parrot, but you can build that understanding through repetition, and this is something that's super, super helpful. There are people who've explained this idea way better than me. Animals is a content marketing agency, and they sort of talk about this same concept through a different perspective, but essentially what they try to tell you is sort of what you see here on the slide. You pick a couple of core ideas that you want to cover, and then you start building different ideas about specific content pieces in order to represent that concept. So this is basically how this goes. I know that most of it is related to actually thinking through your stuff, so I have a few goodies for you. You can take a picture of that, scan the QR code, or even better, actually take a picture on your phone, because then when you open your Photos app tomorrow, you'll see that and you remember that you didn't actually go through the whole thing, because that usually happens. When you go there, you find the slides from today, a short worksheet that you can use to find your remarkable content angles, and a couple of things I'm currently working on, including a workshop on how to incorporate this idea and scale it through AI, which you may find helpful. But this is it from me, the final thing you'll find on that page. Thanks past me for including that image, because I would have forgotten otherwise. I have a weekly newsletter, and if you find this valuable and you want to talk more about content, you can find me there. Thank you.